Welcome, everyone. Today, we are unpacking one of the most powerful insights in modern higher education marketing, why intent matters most. Amidst endless chatter about a traditional demographic enrollment cliff, this landmark report with Kale reveals that adult enrollment isn't a supply problem. It could be a targeting and understanding problem. So, over 65 million adult learners in the United States have active intent to enroll, and we are going to explore who they are throughout our session today. As we shared, we welcome you to ask questions throughout. Just very briefly, my name is Casey O'Brien. Along with my colleague Hannah McNamee, we will be serving as your moderators for today's webinar. And I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speakers and welcome them. Jack McKenzie is founder and CEO of the Adult Prospect Pipeline, providers of both CollegeAPP and CareerAPP services. Jack founded the company in 2019 after 20 years in market research and strategic planning and an extensive career in motion picture marketing and newsroom production. And Andy Carlson is Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. Andy is a higher education policy expert with over 20 years of state, government, nonprofit, and for-profit industry experience. Collectively, these two individuals offer a broad experience, and we're delighted to have them speak today. But before we begin our session, we'd like to introduce and welcome our speaker, Mary Lappin Pope. Mary serves as Strategic Officer Access at Lumina Foundation. Mary, thanks for joining us today and offering our welcome.
Thanks so much, Casey, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm delighted to welcome you today to today's discussion, and especially grateful to our partners here at CollegeAPP and at Kale for their leadership in this important work. Lumina supported this research because we believe that understanding learners' experiences, aspirations, and barriers is critical to building education workforce systems that create real opportunity. And this report gives us an incredibly valuable window into what adults across the country are telling us. One of the headline findings from this report is that more than 1 in 4 adults intend to pursue education or training in the next 2 years. That's a powerful reminder that interest in learning remains strong. Adults continue to see education and training as a pathway to new opportunities, career growth, economic mobility, and personal fulfillment. But today's session isn't intended to walk you through the report at a high level. I'm sure many of you have already read it. Instead, we're going to dig deeper into the data and explore some of the questions that matter most for institutions, employers, policymakers, and advocates like you all. So questions like, who are the adults expressing the strongest intent to learn? What motivates them to take that next step? And just as importantly, what obstacles just continue to stand in their way? The answers matter because adult learners are not just a single group. Their experiences, their goals, their challenges, they vary significantly based on where they are in the educational journey and in their lives. At Lumina, we often talk about the importance of creating learning opportunities that lead to credentials of value and real economic mobility. But achieving that vision starts with listening. The research is, at its core, an opportunity to listen what adults are telling us about their goals and their realities. I'm excited for this conversation ahead and for the insights that the team will share. Thank you again for joining us. And with that, let's dive in.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and for our extreme appreciation goes out to Lumina Foundation and to Kale for your support of this work. Here's a quick review of our agenda today. And now I'd like to turn things over to Andy and Jack as we start with a look at this key nationwide data. Andy?
Thank you, Casey. So we're going to dive right in and kind of set the stage with some of the high-level findings from the report. And then, as Casey and Mary talked about already, we'll then dive into motivations and obstacles and other aspects of it, and really go a little bit deeper than the kind of the high-level summary of the report. But first and foremost, based on 300,000 surveys that we've conducted over the last 5 years of adults asking about their educational and training aspirations, the first finding, the first bullet point, is 27% of those respondents between the ages of 25 and 64 nationwide say they intend to enroll in education or workforce training programs in the next 2 years. Extrapolating that out to the entire 25 to 64 U.S. population, That would mean 41.7 million adults have intent to pursue education or training opportunities. And if we were to extrapolate that out to the entire US population, 18 and up, that number would be 65 million adults. So compare that to the average size of each year's high school graduation class, which is about 3.8 million each year, or what we consider the traditional age population, right? And the opportunity for post-secondary education is really clear. It's adult learners. That's the opportunity, especially in light of the demographic cliff. That means that 3.8 million number is going to actually decline over the next few years. But of course, this is only an opportunity for higher ed if its systems and programs are in place to support these adult learners at scale. Jump into the next slide, please, Casey. All right. So 27%, that's the overall number of the 300,000 respondents, but let's dig in. So 27% express intent overall, but intent is not evenly distributed. We see greater prevalence of intent among some notable demographic populations, specifically for Black and African American respondents. 43% of those said yes to that question. Among Hispanic and Latino populations, the number is 39%. For low-income households, we're looking at 35%. 30% of females said yes to that question. And then among the some college no degree population, just a third, exactly a third, 33% of some college no degree adults are still expressing intent and interest in getting additional education and training and probably completing that credential. Now let's put some real numbers to that. So utilizing the CollegeAPP database and looking at that 25 to 64 population, let's put some real numbers to that. So these percentages represent sizable populations, right? So among Black African American respondents, those with intent represent a population of 5.5 million Black Americans, 8.3 million of Hispanic origin individuals in the US, 23.9% female. Among lower income households, the number is 15.5 million, and then 15.2 million for the share of the some college no degree, a population between 25 and 64 with intent, extrapolating out from our survey. What I think is really interesting is the fact that intent is spread across all education levels to varying degrees. And I think some of you have heard me say this already, and I know Mary at Lumina has. I think higher education kind of on the whole, when they talk about focusing on adult learners, they've really focused on the some college no degree or some college no credential adult, which is a very sizable population that I think we can quantify with the good work that the National Student Clearinghouse has done. But only a third of those individuals, which is still sizable, express intent. But we also see sizable intent among those with just a high school or GED, or those with less than high school, those that are no college, no degree. We can see really strong intent among those that have earned an associate's degree, and even those that have already earned a bachelor's degree and an advanced degree. So the potential adult learner market and the adults that we need to serve as higher education, post-secondary education, and training programs really is much broader than some college no degree. So we need to have systems in place that do support some college no degree adults. But also, what about those in need of adult basic education, maybe to earn their GED as a first step into a post-secondary pathway, or those that already have earned a credential, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or even more, that still need additional education or training to realize the economic benefits of those degrees. So we can just see here with the slide that intent is spread across all education levels. Excuse me. The next few slides are going to look at the relationship. Can we go back to the blue slide, please, Casey? Sorry. The next few slides are going to look at the relationship between educational attainment and income. They'll show a map representing the entire US population, highlighting income level distribution. Orange and red dots in the map will represent higher income households, while the greens are middle incomes and the blue and black dots will represent lower income. So notice what happened when we start looking at these three maps that we'll show you here, one after the other. It's also looking at current education attainment. So this is those that have already earned a bachelor's degree, household income among households that have a bachelor's degree or higher earner in the household. And we can see this map is primarily orange and red, right? It is dominated by those higher income dots. Those with have already earned a bachelor's degree tend to fall on average, for the most part, among those higher incomes. When we go to the next slide and look at some college no degree, those with some college no degree have seen some economic value from earning college credits. Definitely less orange and red than we saw in the previous map, right? But there's a lot of green here. There's a lot of like maybe even a little bit of yellow. In a lot of ways, on average, earning some college credit does pay off, and kind of on average gets folks into like the middle incomes. And then when we look at no college, no degree, the final of our three maps here, um, I think it's pretty stark, right? Like for the no college, no degree, income levels are predominantly lower. We're seeing significant clusters of the blue, purple, and black dots, those representing household incomes of 35,000 and under across the country. So what do these all mean? It's not just income, right? More education, on average, does mean higher incomes, and that's great. But what that means is that allows these individuals that have earned credentials of value and realize the value of those credentials, to make choices that they want, to have the life that they want, to make choices like getting married if they so choose, starting a family and raising children if that is something that's desired, buying a home, having stability in your community, getting engaged in that community, having the bandwidth and time to allow for that, being able to save for retirement. Education attainment on average pays off, and we all know that. And that allows, higher incomes than allow for those types of opportunities and the stability that we all hope for. One more slide on income, and then I'll turn it over to Jack to dive into some other areas of the report. But not all who earn a bachelor's degree have had success. And while on average there is significant economic ROI on that degree, there does remain sizable intent among those with a bachelor's degree currently. And income, looking at this chart here, income does seem to be a strong factor in that intent. Nearly 40% of those with a degree, but still earning less than $50,000, express intent, say yes to that question, do you intend to enroll in any education or training in the next 2 years? And by and large, these individuals have not realized the benefit of that degree economically. So I'd point out that these individuals as well are not on any institution stop out list. They're not a some college no degree adult. In terms of the attainment agenda, they've checked the box, they've attained, they've earned their credential. So who's focusing in on them? They've already attained that degree, but they are likely still struggling. And the question for higher ed then is what programs are needed to help these individuals that have earned a bachelor's degree, are still struggling economically and likely struggling in other aspects of their life. What programs are needed to help them upskill or reskill to realize the benefits of that degree?
Am I unmuted now? There we go. Thanks, Andy. One of the things that we're really excited that we added to the body of 300,000 surveys 2 or 3 years in was this concept of, okay, I have intent. I say yes to that question, which is the most important, right? Intent matters most. But as we know, they're not all enrolling, right? So therefore, there are obstacles to not realizing or not acting upon that intent. And if as a category, higher education, post-secondary education more broadly, can understand and address or mitigate those obstacles, that would be a good thing. And we can get more of those people who have expressed intent to get education, make it a reality for them. There's also an interesting part of this that is what motivates people. What is it that they're looking for? When they say yes, what's in the back of their mind is the reason for that. What is it that drives them? So we're gonna dive into that a little bit. We're going to look at some of the demographics or the qualities, data qualities of these folks, and from different angles, including education, attainment, and gender, et cetera. Knowing that for any individual community, college district, state, region of the country, there may be variances in which, as we've offered and will continue to offer, if someone really wants to dig into their area to see the nuances of their communities, please reach out after this, during this, put your name in there and say, I'd love to talk to you about, my community college district in Southeast Kansas. We'd be happy to look at it and show you what those things are in your area. So let's go ahead and start digging in, or unpacking, I think is what we're saying we're doing here today. So this is the three options on motivations, or the highest three. Gain skills for current career is at 43%. Interestingly, just general learning and growth, and we're going to look at the demographics of that, and it begins to make a little bit more sense, is actually the second strongest motivator among the adult population who says yes to the intent question. The career pivot to like change careers is certainly a viable motivation. It's 21%. So if you take that of the 65 million, we're talking about 12 million people for whom this is their motivator. But it's going to be interesting when we dig in to see who says that as opposed to who says gain skills. So when you're thinking about communicating with adults or listening for certain signs from an adult learner on what's the best pathway for them, this will be good to keep in mind as we dig in a little bit. So gaining skills in the current career, and this is really interesting. This is something I don't know that we expected to see as a finding, but once you think through it, it actually makes a lot of sense. This is actually people who are actually doing okay in their careers. They're more likely to be people who already have a bachelor's degree or more than that. They're more likely to be employed full time, and they're middle to high income folks. So those first two maps that Andy showed, the folks who say gaining skills for a current career, in other words, this is more of an advancement, this is a promotion, this is more responsibility, this is gaining skills that maybe didn't even exist, or the need for these skills didn't exist a few years back when they got the job, when they had the training, presumably pretty good training already through having a bachelor's degree. Now they need to learn new things. So that messaging for people, and I think Andy showed that graphic of the intent among people with a bachelor's degree but who are still having household income under 50,000. This clearly is something. They've got a job, right? But they need to move up to realize some of the opportunities that exist both in the career but also in their lives. The general growth and learning actually is an interesting acknowledgement among the no college, no degree. So these are people who did not pursue post-secondary. We all know that I think it's in the low 60s of people, high school graduates, 60% who do something after school, but that means there's close to 40% of people who don't, right? And so that adds up. You add that number to that number to that number year after year after year, you get the millions and millions of people who are in that third map, the no college, no degree, who are, I'm going to say they're stuck. right? They're stuck because they don't have the education to get the job that would take them off that map and put them on the next one. And that's, I think, in some ways, visually what we're trying to do together is like, let's get people off having those dots that represent income under 40,000 and into a map that shows income between 60 and 90,000 or over 100,000, et cetera. And there's a couple ways about doing that that we've learned looking at the data. It's interesting that the Some College No Degree group, the one that does get a lot of attention in the space, also says general learning and growth. It's possible that they've attained some level of skill that they want, but there's other things that they think will help them. Who knows what the case may be. Now, when I say who knows, you can know if we go all the way through the data and find these people on the individual level, we can figure that out. But as a kind of a research finding, it's about a third of that population. Now, the career changers, again, are the people on that third map. These are the lower household income folks. They're either unemployed or would, in some cases, or overemployed, like they have to work 2 or 3 underemployed jobs, right, to get enough income to just survive day to day. And the career change was least motivating for high income learners because they're doing fine, right? So when we're talking about targeting and communicating with people who have household income under 50,000, you really would focus on this career change opportunity, whatever that opportunity is in your community. As well as the message of just general human growth and learning for the sake of having more day-to-day skills or things that you wish you would learn when you had the first chance but didn't take advantage of post-secondary education. That's where that no college, no degree comes into play. Obstacles. Okay, so this is the well, of course, slide. That 8 out of 10 adult learners say that cost is a factor. Now, we also know that there are programs in nearly every state that need to be communicated that can mitigate the fear of cost pretty quickly. 32 states offer some form of free college tuition in the post-secondary space. There's if it's not called that, it might be called a Promise Scholarship or an Excelsior Scholarship. Or there are lots of ways for people to access programs. Everyone's raising their hand these days about Workforce Pell. Is this a new opportunity to mitigate costs as it relates to these adults going to school? But I think the point there is psychologically they think cost is a problem. This gets Dick and Andy and I have spent years talking about the years he spent in developing really good adult learner environments, adult learner opportunities, et cetera, but that they didn't always deliver people to the programs, right? I will say one of the reasons we started CollegeAPP was to bridge that gap. And what's interesting is, even though 32 states have free college programs and these other things, the awareness of those opportunities has not sunk into people, right? A state will offer something and they just assume that its residents will learn about the opportunities, when in fact what we have to do is smack them over the head with those opportunities and mitigate that fear that they can't afford it. Not surprisingly, the whole ecosystem discussion about mountains of debt and the other things that kind of faced the higher education space is creating a psychological barrier, right? That there's this belief that college is so expensive, I'll be paying student loans for the rest of my life, et cetera, et cetera. And if you think about someone who's just working two jobs and trying to get through, and that's what they hear more than it's free, they hear it's really expensive and you're going to go into debt, which is a very scary thing for people who don't have much income already, right? So costs, I don't want to, we tend to go past it into these other ones, which we're going to, but I don't want to lose cost because it's just so real for them. And having an approach to dealing with costs with adult learners, I think is really critical. Time is the other thing. And time is an issue for 2/3. And I do think that a lot of the evolution of non-traditional education and training has is making an impact on the time factor. The flexibility that's available for a number of programs and a number of pathways that colleges are creating helps that. But don't forget that it's also a huge impediment, again, psychologically. That's what they think. I don't have the money, I don't have the time, right? So overcoming those is really important. Now, there are also meaningful barriers other than time and money. And these are the options in the survey. So I think at this point we got about 225,000 people who'll fill this one out because this, as I said, we didn't start with this question at the beginning. But there's 11% who say, besides time and money, that the perception that it's difficult to sign up, that it's a complicated system, is an obstacle. A lot of talk, rightfully so, about the lack of childcare, right? Childcare becomes also a cost issue, right? Because if you have to pay for childcare, right, then now you're going out of pocket to get the education, and that what you also think is expensive. And then there's a couple of obstacles here that we find really interesting from a human standpoint. There's some fear. There's like, I don't know if I can do it. The difficulty of the subject matter scares me. And I feel like I won't fit in, right? So we're now talking about kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. These are things that can and should be acknowledged. And to the extent that your institution can overcome these, you can break down one of those psychological obstacles for a lot of these learners. Now, again, the percentage may appear small, 11%, 9%, et cetera. But we'll show you here real quick. It adds up pretty fast as we look at the country. So the difficulty of signing up, 11%. That means it's almost 4.6 million adult learners who say that is their number one obstacle besides time and money. And you can see that it's interesting, some of the breakdown here. The largest education attainment group here is some college, no degree, right? Which means they're doing okay, but they still have intent to get more education, but they're doing okay. That means they're probably working, right? So if they're working and yet they still want the training, they fear that they don't have the time to do it, right? And so all of the wraparound services and the ways that we can engage adults outside the traditional classroom day is really critical to that. Not surprisingly, almost half these people are married. They have children. 40% have children in the household. All those things are kind of building up, and this difficulty, like I don't understand that system, and I kind of want to get away from it. Let's go on to the next one. Here's the lack of childcare. So remember, that was 9% of the population, which translates to 3.74 million adults. 57% of these people are married, right? They've got, but interestingly, it really concentrates on so folks who are married and who have household income under 50,000. So childcare is both a necessity. It also becomes obviously like a financial challenge. Each of these slides, and you'll get this deck, have this breakout of urban, suburban, and rural. Again, it's generalized. We put it there because we want you to think about where you are, and then let's talk about how this plays out in your category. But those always add up to 100, and it's the Census Bureau definition of rural, urban, and suburban. Difficulty of the subject matter, 3.7 million folks. Again, household income less than 50,000. So what you're seeing is the people with that household income under 50,000 are raising a lot of red flags. And yet they're the ones who we want to get off that map and into the next one. So that's, the places that have aggressive enrollment funnel communication, navigators at some schools or in some systems, and coaches in other areas. The way these folks are unlikely, which is why there's so much intent, but not as much enrollment, unlikely to figure these things out on their own. They're going to need some help. And by the way, it's worth it because we saw what the payoff is in those household income maps. In the fear of not fitting in. 2 million people, age 25, 64, say, they're just not going to be comfortable there. It doesn't feel right. We were interested. I would actually be curious if there are people here who have some perspective on the fact that 58% of the people who say their fear of fitting in are women. Not sure I can make anything of that, but it's a meaningful statistic difference. And so I think it's worth listening for if you're encountering an adult learner who's expressing some reservations about that. Also, you can see here the high school or less population feeling like, oh, I'm just not a college kind of person, right? And even among those who actually have gone to college, right, which tells you, I think, why not all of the some college no degree folks have intent to get more education because they've experienced it. In some cases, they got what they needed. Other cases, it didn't go well. And it looks like there's a little scar tissue here about them coming back to school, a place where they started. And now that I'm going to show up again, I'm 10, 12, 15 years older. I just don't feel like I remember what it was. I feel like I won't fit in now. Obstacle. This is something that we have kind of adopted actually a CollegeAPP, and we're communicating this in some ways not to the colleges and mostly the people on this call because you guys get this, but we're trying to take this message kind of upstream a little bit to your state governments and the federal government and kind of talking about the role of the human in all of these, the attainment goals, the in-demand occupations that are putting pressure on colleges. And there's just so much energy on the kind of the operational side of getting more adults educated. But none of that really matters. It's just an exercise in process until someone does something, right? So a class, a training course frankly is a syllabus until there's someone in the seat or on their computer taking that class, until they enroll in it and learn. The skills, the talk about skills, really is just this definition until someone masters it. Once they master it, right? Now that's a skill. But before that, it's just a definition of something that an employer says they need. And a job post is just a post until someone gets that job. There's a lot of talk about 7 million jobs available right now, and there's all these people on the sidelines, and the workforce participation is down. We got to pull people off those sidelines who have intent and get them into these, whether starting with the training course, gaining the skill, and getting the job. So thank you for allowing us to show that. It's something that we're talking about with a lot of people around the country as we speak.
All right. A couple more slides to wrap up, and then we'll have some time for questions. We wanted to kind of like put some of these various components together, and so we're going to take a look at a couple example geographies and look at certain populations, no college, no degree, some college, no degree, and those already with a bachelor's degree, and kind of what they look like in those geos. So, Casey, you want to jump to the next slide, please? All right. So opportunity prospecting. Let's look at the no college, no degree population. We have models as well, and we're going to talk about this in a future webinar, on programs of interests among those with intent. And think about this through the lens of a lot of the focus that Jack's already just talked about, from the federal government and from state government and from economic regional development organizations around high demand occupations, things in the skilled trades, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all really good work, but what we need to also understand is, do the individuals in those areas have interest in those programs? And in a lot of ways, they do. Top six programs of interest among the no college, no degree population. You can read them there. So good alignment with like advanced manufacturing or skilled trades, and a lot of healthcare opportunities, along with like IT, cyber. So good alignment with a lot of those high priority occupations. Let's look at the Atlanta metro area. So we ran a 25-mile radius around metro. So this is a significantly urban area, and high intent, no college, no degree adults in this area. There's about 352,000 of them. Just about half, 49% are single. And interestingly enough, in Atlanta, 16% of this high intent population are likely to have a primary language spoken other than English. Probably going to be Spanish in most cases. And so that's kind of an interesting, just little tidbit that we gleaned from our database when we looked at the Atlanta area. We can jump in on the some college no degree population, pulling a different geography here. But among some college no degree adults with intent, here are the programs of interest. So we see some overlap. Healthcare and business and IT, cyber, and skilled trades are here, but we also have education and then STEM opportunities as well coming into this group. Let's look at the Kansas City metro area. So here we looked at Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri, and did a 50-mile radius around that area, and found 166,000 approximately, some college no degree, high intent adults. And so we have a really nice mix here. It's about a third, a little bit over a third urban, but a large majority. It's bringing in a lot of those suburban areas. So again, using those U.S. Census codes for rural, urban, and suburban. But we also have a sizable rural population. So 10% within 50 miles of Kansas City, 10% of the high intent some college no degree adults are currently in a rural area. And then one last one, let's jump into one of my favorite cities to visit, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Here we did a 50-mile radius, and we are looking at bachelor's degree holders. So these are those with intent that already have a bachelor's degree. And before honing in on Minneapolis, I should say that across the country, the main programs of interest among this population, you can see there as well. So good alignment with some college no degree, but we do have a little bit of difference, right? We've got arts and humanities popping up, and a large focus on STEM, healthcare, and business. So bachelor's degree holders in Minneapolis with high intent to enroll, just over 200,000. And these do seem to be, based on some of the other slides that we've shown in the data that we've presented today, note that this is a high income population on average, right? So most of these individuals, in looking at the map, are not those that didn't realize any benefit, but are looking to advance from their current career, get ahead, get that promotion, so continuing education opportunities to help them continue to advance. And Jack, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of wrap things up, and then we can take a couple questions as well.
Yeah, I see we've got 5 minutes as the agenda called for. The thing I'd like to say is this is all for you, right? So we started doing these surveys in December of 2019. We didn't get very many finished in December, but really at the beginning of 2020. Um, at the time, for the express need to be able to create predictive models that gave colleges the opportunity to um, take advantage of person level data to market and offer programs to adult learners. And that's always been the one problem that we look to solve is bridging that gap between adults and the good programs that can change their lives. Along the way, we got to 100,000 surveys and then 150 and then 200,000 and then 300,000. And the survey results themselves are its own entity. We interpret them and use data science to turn them into predictive models. But it is such a blessing to be able to say, that's what we do, but this is what we have, and this data set is rich, which is why I think Casey's going to tell us that we're having another webinar in a few several weeks to talk about another aspect of it, which is the interest in programs by demographics and education attainment. And so please take advantage of this gift, and I will thank Mary and the wonderful folks at Lumina. The partnership we have with Kale as it relates to the interpretation of these results, and the communication of them is immensely important to our ability to put these out so that your institution can learn and in an ongoing way. I would like to believe that at some point we'll do the next one of these when we get to 450,000 surveys, which should be in a year and a half or 2 years. And we'll continue tracking this so you have the best data possible to make really informed decisions. So I'll stop with that. And Hannah, are you going to help us with questions? Is that right?
Yes, I sure am. There we go. Hopefully you can see me now. Our first question, which you may have addressed already, but the question was from Stacy. With those who already have a bachelor's or graduate degree, do they clarify what level of credential they're interested in pursuing? For example, certificate, graduate degree. That was her question.
So I believe the answer to that is yes. I don't know that we've yet pulled that. It's in the data set. So Hannah, if you would make a note for us to go find that, we can look at that because that is one of the questions that is asked in the survey. It's one of these why we're going to do multiple webinars because there's only so much you can show a data set of 300,000 surveys in 45 minutes. So that's a great one. And we'll get back, Stacy, we'll get back to you specifically and share with the group what the answer to that is.
Okay, great. And then Aaron asked, what percentage of overall survey responses were from women?
Well, the results that you're seeing is weighted data, right? So we put the survey out. We do not, what's the survey? We do not quota. Anyone who is willing to take that survey, we accept it. And so we don't at the aggregate level of all those surveys, we just accept them. To analyze for this, I know that the research team then weighted the data to be representative of the US population. So if women are 51% of the population, then this data set represents 51% female survey takers. So this was weighted on a lot of levels, age, gender, race and ethnicity, education attainment, and geographical. So the weighting schemes made this a very representative sample of the United States population.
Great. And then our final question is, how can institutional research teams best pair this regional intent data with local workforce market demand?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. And it's an active one. There you guys all live in states that have governments and local, regional, statewide, um, who, for lots of reasons, are very competitive with other states and governments, and right for bringing in business, for economic development, et cetera. And what they're beginning to realize is that having this data that shows the intent among the population of the adult population of their state and their interest in certain types of programs is becoming actually a chip. It's it's an advantage that Alabama can hold over Mississippi or that Kansas can hold over Nebraska, right? That they have analyzed their workforce and their workforce possibility to help bring and attract businesses to the state that bring those well-paying jobs, presumably that will change people's course of their lives. And so they're using it actually. And I think as an institution, if you have access to this data, you should take this to your county government, to your regional workforce boards and say, look, this is what's out there. Here are the people who need education. Here's what they're interested in studying. Let's figure this out and do it together so we can put people in the jobs that the state is motivated to fill from an economic development standpoint, as well as meet the needs of the people and the interests of the people who have intent to get education.
Do we have time for one more question?
Well, I do. Andy does.
Okay. Andy does. All right. What score range or value are you using to define high intent?
Excellent question. Is Casey still around?
Yeah, I'm here.
What'd you use for those
What,
last three slides with the
what,
maps?
what was the intent cut?
It was around 27% of the population, so it varied depending on the area because there were other factors. So happy to help you connect with our digital services team if you're looking to find that. But I would say we always start around 50 and then kind of move from there based off of what we're looking for.
Yeah, I do know nationally that 57 is where if you set at 57, then you get 27% of the people who have scores above that. So
Right.
that is often where that sits. It depends on state. As you guys know, we do Ohio models are different than Michigan models are different than New York. And to Casey's point is sometimes that number changes. Some states it's 60, some states it's 54. But on average, at least nationally, it's we would cut at 27 or at 57 to get that 27% of people likely to say yes.
Right. Great. That was a partner on the call that probably had that question. So nice job. Well, thank you so much, Jack, Andy, Mary, and Hannah for joining us today. Thank you all for joining us today for this webinar presentation. As shared, a recording is going to be made available to all of you that registered. And if you did ask a question, we weren't able to get to it today, we're happy to follow up with you through email or follow up directly with you. We're also going to make this recording available on our website, which is adultprospectpipeline.com. We hope that you have enjoyed this session, and we hope to have you join us for our next conversation, which will take place on October 1st, as Jack alluded to, Mapping the Future Student, Career and Pathway Sector Priorities. You can register at the QR code on your screen, or we'll be sending out that invitation as well. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.